I've seen a lot of your content online, but the one that got me the most was absolutely the giant in Afghanistan, the Kandahar giant story. And I don't know if you know, but I had Devin Larratt on the podcast, the arm wrestler, and he told a story about how when he was in the Canadian military, he was deployed in Afghanistan, and one of the guys that he was working with over there had to have a conversation with a warlord, with a local warlord, and he said this guy was 8 feet tall. He said this guy was fucking huge, and not just tall, but wide. He said it was the biggest man he's ever seen in his life.
Well, I've heard a lot of things about giants in Afghanistan. And I find that, I talk about a lot of different topics. I talk about a lot of UFO stuff. And I say some things that I know could get me in trouble. But nothing makes me more nervous than talking about giants, specifically the Kandahar giant and the giants in Kandahar in general.
Why?
Mainly because when I talk to people who know things, they're very, very nervous when we get to this topic. And some of them will just flat out will not talk about giants in general, but specifically giants in Afghanistan. And some of these guys are high-level guys that worked at the Pentagon, and they'll talk rather freely with me about UFOs. But as soon as we broach this topic, it's like they literally will warn me, be careful with this topic.
What?
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
Well, I think that the topic of giants is intermeshed with the occult. That's my personal theory, because nothing else makes sense. Who cares if there's 8 foot tall guys, right? Big deal.
Right. I've seen our giant stories, very crazy, because what's interesting about it is the people that I've talked to that have been in Afghanistan, that were deployed in Afghanistan, not just Devin, but other people, they don't dismiss it. They say, we've heard some weird shit about that place. And the thing that they always say is, you got to realize, like, Afghanistan is an old country. It's old and it's very remote. Like, most of it is very mountainous. It's controlled by warlords. And, look, there's these... What are those? Are they Greek or Roman? Those structures that are there that date the Greek. They look like Greek temples that date back to Alexander the Great, and archaeologists can't study them. They can't go there because it's too dangerous.
It's one of the most remote places on the planet, specifically because it's so dangerous. You can't just go strolling around Afghanistan. I mean, it probably would be easier to go to Antarctica than Afghanistan. And
it's kind of hilarious.
So the story of the Kandahar giant.
Yeah, let's tell the story.
This story has grown into a mythology over the years. Years ago, I was working with a gentleman named Steve Quayle, and we started a production company called Gen 6 Productions. And we were making documentary films mainly about giants, mainly on the topic of giants.
Giants as referred to in the Bible, in ancient history, the Smithsonian giants.
That's right, biblical and historical accounts of giants. So I was traveling around the world investigating giants, and Steve is known for his investigations into giants. And he got a phone call from an elderly woman who told him, "You need to talk to my son. My son has a story he needs to tell you." And she had to convince her son to talk to Steve, and ultimately he did. And he was active duty. He was a C-130 pilot, active duty. He actually went on Coast to Coast with Steve. They went on Coast to Coast together, and he related his story, I believe, with George Norrie, him, Steve, and George. And then later on, we flew him into Bozeman, Montana to put him in our documentary film that we were making. And he wanted to be filmed in silhouette. He did not want his face out there, even though he knew that they're going to be able to mark him just by his voice. So he flies into Bozeman. We meet with him. He shows us his credentials. He was active duty C-130. And then he told us the following story, among many other things that he told us. He said back in 2005, he was deployed in Afghanistan and Iraq, running missions as a C-130 cargo pilot. And oftentimes they would have him fly into Bagram Airfield. And these were routine missions, and so on one of these missions. He's flying into Bagram. But this time when he landed, he was met, as soon as he deplaned, he was met on the tarmac by some individuals that he describes as the babysitters. He calls them the babysitters. He thinks they were either Army intelligence or Air Force intelligence guys, and they didn't tell him. But this was different because when he disembarked, they told him, no photos, no mention of this ever, this never happened. So he knew that whatever was about to happen was top secret. And he had flown classified missions before, usually retrieving Taliban guys, what he described as high-valued assets. But this was different because there were intelligence guys on the tarmac waiting for something. And it turns out what they were waiting for was the cargo that was being delivered on a forklift to the C-130.
Our giant story is very. Did you ever try to find records of who was there and casualties that were reported, deaths that were reported?
It's very difficult. The Pentagon actually released a statement some years ago, which is bizarre to me. You know, basically saying, in paraphrasing, the Kandahar giant incident never happened. There was never a giant that was killed in Afghanistan.
The Pentagon.
Yeah, it was a representative. It was like a spokesman from the Pentagon or something, or a release from the Pentagon.
Is this available online?
Yeah, they actually felt the need to debunk this.
That's hilarious.
Now
that gets me sketchy.
Well, I believed the pilot because he was a very credible guy. He didn't want his name out there. He didn't want fame or notoriety. He was very nervous. He thought there's a good chance that they're going to recognize me by my voice. He was on Coast to Coast AM, and then he's on in our documentary. There's a good chance I'm going to get recognized, and there's going to be some reprisal. He was nervous. Now, they weighed the giant before they loaded him on the C-130, because they have to load everything that goes onto the C-130. The loadmaster weighed him. He weighed 1,100 pounds, and they estimated his height at 10 to 12 feet tall. And so they loaded him onto the C-130, and then they flew him to Qatar. And then they unloaded the cargo in Qatar. And our pilot told me he heard through the grapevine that the body ended up at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He said, I don't know. That's just what I heard. So this is a first-hand account from the C-130 pilot who flew the body himself from Bagram Airfield to Qatar.
Why does all the weird shit go to Wright-Patterson?
That's a good question.
Because that's where the weird shit goes.
Wright-Patterson used to have the Blue Room. I don't know if they still have it, but they used to have a room there called the Blue Room where they had all of the alien artifacts that had been recovered and that they were studying. And it was completely off limits to anybody except for people who had access, the very few who had access. And but the Kandahar giant, you know, that story... a colleague of mine, L.A. Marsuli, he had another guy come to him, a different guy. We interviewed the pilot, Steve and I. L.A. had another guy come to him that was, I can't remember the details, he was a special forces guy. He had firsthand knowledge of the event as well. And we're not sure if it's the same one or a different one. If there was just one incident with the giants or if there were multiple incidents.
Did you ever...
It's a conundrum. And
if it's real.
It's...
You think it's real?
The giants in general?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
What makes you think it's real?
Okay, so let me tell you why I think that this thing's being covered up, and then I'll tell you why I think it's real, and we'll go to Sardinia for that. So I, like you, have been wondering for a long time, like, what is the big deal? And initially, people in my field, especially people who are coming from a biblical perspective, the common answer is, well, the existence of giants would affirm the biblical narrative, right? And so the secular atheist types don't want the biblical narrative affirmed. That can't be right, because the existence of giants doesn't just affirm the biblical narrative, it affirms the myths and legends of every ancient culture across the globe,
right,
including the Bible. So it's not something that's specific, exclusive to the text of Scripture. So it would just affirm all these legends in general. So the only thing that makes sense to me at this point, and the other line of thinking, by the way, would be that it would somehow conflict with the theory of evolution by natural selection, which I don't really buy into that either, because they would just say that this branch of humanoids they descended from Gigantopithecus or something like that. I don't think it would be that difficult of a problem for the theory of evolution by natural selection either. I'm not myself an evolutionist, but I don't see them having that difficult of a problem here. So the only thing left on the table for me is that there's something very sinister going on in regard to the remains of giants. And if you study the mythology of giants all over the world, especially in the ancient Near East, you will discover that there was in fact a cult of giants, that there were cultures that venerated giants, and that there was a very particular belief about giants. And this goes back into the book of Enoch. And the idea is that this race of beings who are not entirely human, they're hybrids, that when they die, you can still make contact with their spirits, with their souls. They can be summoned. In fact, these are the demons in the New Testament of the Bible, these are the demons that possess people. This is the origin of demons, by the way, in Hebrew cosmology. So there's this pervasive idea, again, especially in the ancient Near East, that dead giants can be communicated with and can possess living human beings, their spirits. And so you have a cult of giants in the ancient Near East, especially among the Canaanites. And the Canaanites, it's a conundrum. It's a cover-up of the pedophilia.
Or even if it's not pedophilia, even just adultery or drug use or whatever.
Scenario in which, let's just say for the sake of argument, that it's true.
Okay,
that the legends are true, the giants are real. That you can make contact with their spirits.
Through their bones?
Maybe through their remains. Or at least people believe this. And so
is there some sort of a method that they use?
Yeah, well, okay, so this will get us into Sardinia. So whenever anyone asks me, what's the best evidence you've ever seen for the existence of giants? Now, you've already cited some historical context around this. The legend of giants is everywhere. It's in every continent. And you have giants, aside from the biblical account, obviously all over the Mesopotamia, the cult of giants. In the United States, during the era of the Smithsonian Gate, the Smithsonian Institution's apparent cover-up of giants, especially the ones that were being discovered in the mounds here in the United States. But it's pervasive. In Peru, there's legends of giants. And the natives, the indigenous peoples, absolutely believe there was a primordial race of giants. The same thing in Central America. They believe there was a primordial race of giants that was destroyed in a cataclysm, specifically a flood. That's what the Inca believed. That Viracocha, the guy Viracocha, created first a race of giants, but they were stupid and evil, and so he destroyed them in a flood. Same story down in up in Mexico and among the Aztec, and the Native Americans, the six-fingered red-haired giants, and so forth. So there's a lot of historical context, and of course it's anecdotal, but how much anecdotal evidence just. At one point, does anecdotal evidence just become evidence when it's so pervasive all over the world?
Right.
So, as I was traveling around the world studying giants and researching this topic and investigating different stories and legends, I went to Malta, which is very interesting. Obviously, lots of legends of giants in Malta associated with the megaliths, and then I kind of hit ground zero for giants, which is the island of Sardinia, and the island of Sardinia is located west of Rome. It's part of Italy. It's in the Western Mediterranean, below Corsica. And many people don't realize this about Sardinia, but Sardinia has the most megaliths anywhere on Earth. It has the highest concentration of megaliths anywhere that I've been, as far as I'm aware of. There are these massive megalithic towers called nuraghi that were constructed allegedly by or conventionally by the Nuragic civilization, Bronze Age civilization. And there are today still at least 7,000 of these things standing. You can go to Sardinia and see 7,000 nuraghi towers. There were at one time 10 to 30,000 of these megalithic towers. And some of these towers stood over 100 feet tall. The cover.
Are these experts like local historians? Like what?
Some of them, yeah. There's. You can go to the. You can also go to the museums in Sardinia and read a lot of this stuff. Now I have a friend named Paula Loy, who's I think she's the best tour guide in Sardinia, and she's extremely knowledgeable about all this stuff. She'll take you to the museum and you walk through all of this information with her.
Oh, something of all these things, or that some wealthy crazy person didn't get a hold of someone and say, listen, I'll give you $10 million, get me a hand. You know, I want to put it in a glass case in my house. Because we know that they've done that with Egyptian stuff. Like a lot of Egyptian artifacts have been pilfered.
Yep, artifacts from Peru.
Yes.
Central and South America. Yeah, there's a very robust black market.
Which is so wild. Like, who are these people that have these things?
That's a good question. Well, I was told in Sardinia, they told me that in some cases the bones were confiscated. They were gathered up and thrown into vehicles and carted away. Sai told me another story where he was digging a foundation for a house, he and an associate, and they came upon a very large sarcophagus. And they pried it open, and he said there was a body of a very large person inside, and it was wearing some sort of black fabric. And there were coins that were minted from Antoninus Pius, the Roman emperor, from that time. And they reported there was a local priest, and they told the priest that they found a body, right? Like, we found a dead body. What do we do? And so the priest came over, and he looked down to the pit. He said, give me the coins. I gave him the coins. He said, break the bones up and distribute them in the foundation of the house. I mean, this was, if you went to Sardinia today, I think you would think to yourself, okay, yeah, I can see how there's no one's taking pictures or anything over here. This is like going way back in time in Italy, especially back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s when most of these things happened. Now, the excavations at Santa Anastasia happened in the late 70s, early 80s. But all these other stories are coming from the, 60s, 50s, 40s. So, I mean, there was just so many people who I talked to. Random people would tell me as I interviewed them that, oh yeah, I was digging in my basement one time and years ago, and I dug up a hand. It was a hand, 5 fingers, and it was 3 times the size of my hand. Now, that's
5 fingers.
Yeah, that's random. That could just be. Megafauna something. I don't know what a giant sloth hand looks like or whatever. And Let me say this. There is no question, no question, that a lot of the accounts that you hear about giants, not the ones associated with coins and jewelry, but a lot of the accounts that you hear about giants and the skeletons of giants, they do have prosaic explanations. A lot of them do end up being megafauna bones, especially giant sloths and stuff like that. There was a case in Peru, actually it was in Ecuador. This is referenced in the Chronicles of Peru, that there's a place called Santa Elena, and it's a peninsula in Ecuador, and there's various chroniclers who talk about.
Are these experts like local historians? That's what's weird. And there's also this very bizarre desire that people have of destroying things from the past.
Yeah.
We find that with, the Taliban did that,
That's right.
There's a bunch of different incredible archaeological sites that were destroyed by past civilizations. We just talked the other day about the Kailasa temple in India, about how they tried to destroy that for a couple of years. They sent 1,000 people, and they could barely put a dent in it.
Who was trying to destroy that?
Oh, who was it, Jamie? Do we remember?
Didn't like it. I don't know.
some
Warlord or general or something. I'll find out.
Who they came upon this temple that they didn't like, that someone else had built it and someone else owned it and someone else had constructed it. Yeah. The Kailasa temple that was built entirely out of stone?
Yeah, the one that was built like literally carved into the ground?
Into the side of the mountain.
Yeah.
Emperor, say that name. You could say it. You're really good with words.
Mughal.
What's his name?
Looks like Mughal to me. I've never heard of it before.
What's the second one? Aurangzeb?
I don't know.
Aurangzeb. Historical figure widely reported to have ordered the destruction of the Kailasa temple. In 1682, however, his mission failed because the monolithic temple was carved top down from a single solid volcanic rock. His army could only disfigure some sculptures before giving up.
Oh, this was in 1682.
Yeah. But it's just wild that people have always had this inclination to destroy old, fascinating things.
Yeah, that's right. Especially you find this, what's really sad is in Central America among the Aztec, the Maya, there were many codexes of the Aztec and the Maya that were intentionally destroyed by the Catholic Church, by various agents of the Catholic Church would intentionally destroy these codexes. Could you imagine the information that was stored in those things?
Well, how about the Library of Alexandria?
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what was in there?
Yeah.
And they burnt that several times.
Yeah.
Right? It's there's the historical accounts in North America are interesting because there's actual newspaper stories from was it like I believe it's the 1800s? Well, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. There are all kinds of newspaper stories about giants in the 1800s.
Newspaper stories about giant skeletons that have been discovered and excavated.
Yes, from the mid-1800s to the early 1900s.
And somehow or another, they all relate to the Smithsonian.
Most of them were associated with the mounds and the mound builders. There were thousands of mounds east of the Mississippi. I mean, people don't realize how many of these mounds there were. And these are, the monumental mounds and earthworks. Some of them still stand today. Not all of them are burial mounds. You have different kinds of mounds. Some of them are effigies. Some of them are platform mounds. But many of them are burial mounds. And many of them contain very prosaic things, like the bones of native people. But some of them were said to have contained some very, very interesting artifacts. And among those artifacts were the bones of giants, according to the newspaper reports. Now,
see if you can find.
I'm not looking.
There's a lot of them from the 1800s. Go read them today. You can pull them up and read them now. He says the eyes of that extinct species of giants, whose bones fill the mounds of America, have gazed upon Niagara as ours do now. Those are from Lincoln's lecture notes.
Really?
I believe it's 1845, the date of those notes.
Oh, I gotta read that.
Now, here's the contention, okay? This is interesting, because here's the contention.
Okay.
The contention is that he was talking about mastodons and mammoths, megafauna.
Right.
That's what people say, because he does mention mastodon and the mammoth later on in the lecture, in the speech. However, what they won't tell you is before he mentions that, he's in a biblical context. Of giant sloths and mastodons and mammoths in the mounds routinely. It was very rare.
Right, but it seems like if you found dead giants in the mounds, that it would be more specific. You would talk about it more than just that.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
The reference is ambiguous. So we're left to wonder, is he talking about dead giants in the biblical context, which he's clearly in a biblical context before he gets it, or is he talking about mastodons?
And the issue is that there are giants in the Bible.
And also that when he penned these lecture notes, there were newspaper articles circulating in the United States announcing the discovery of the bones of giants in the mounds.
Right.
So it's up for debate. I don't know the answer.
There's got to be somebody who works at the Smithsonian that is sick of this.
Yeah.
There's got to be someone.
We need that guy.
There's got to be some whistleblower that just take your fucking camera phone, get down there, and film something, man. It seems like if there really are some remnants of some of these things, and the thing that's interesting is, what is the museum that John Reeves has issue with? Sometimes,
right? Yeah,
where it's like
hip,
there's some sort of an impact, some massive shock wave that kills them all instantly.
Yeah, I mean, instantly freezes them.
Yeah,
and I think one of the hypotheses that I've heard is that you had referencing the Younger Dryas impact event. You had potentially a comet or comets that were ripping through the atmosphere at such high rates of speed that they were pulling in the vacuum of space, so that sub-zero temperature air, and like blasting it down on the Earth.
Yes.
And that air was so cold it would instantly freeze whatever was in its path. As these comets are breaking through the atmosphere. I don't know if that's true, but it's very difficult to explain how you can flash freeze something like that.
Right.
And then in other parts of the Earth, you have apparent biomass burning. So you have mastodons over here freezing, right, solid. You have other megafauna over here that were clearly swept up in a flood. You have other megafauna and other kinds of extinct plants and stuff that have evidence of burning, biomass burning. So it's like some sort of absolutely unimaginable cataclysm
Yes.
that struck planet Earth at some time, circa 11,000 BC.
And it seems like there's a lot of physical evidence in terms of iridium and soil samples.
Yeah.
And it seems it's very common in space, very rare on Earth, layers of iridium. And then the dark carbon, layers of burnt material. It seems there was incredible fires. So
Yeah.
we were probably hit by asteroids. They also find that nuclear glass, the same stuff that they found during the Trinity explosion.
Yep.
They find little particles of that everywhere that seems to indicate a huge impact that happened. And this is what Randall Carlson also believes, the same timeline was what caused the melting of the ice layer over North America and created the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
And caused the massive flooding and the land features that you see from space. If you look down from satellite imagery, it clearly looks like there was just immense amounts of water that washed over the land.
Yeah, and Randall talks a lot about the impact of those comets on the ice sheets. The Laurentide ice sheet, for example, 2 miles thick.
Yes.
What happens when you slam a comet into a 2 mile thick ice sheet? Go read them today. You can pull them up and read them now. He says the eyes of that extinct species of giants, whose bones fill the mountains of America, have gazed upon Niagara.
Wealthy, crazy person didn't get a hold of someone and say, listen, I'll give you $10 million, get me a hand. I want to put it in a glass case in my house.
It
Because
does
we
seem
know that they've done that with Egyptian stuff. Like